are back to graphing. Last week we concentrated on sine and cosine. Today I'm going to switch gears just a little bit and we are going to go to cosecant and secant. What's nice is that cosecant and secant relate to sine and cosine. In fact, they are reciprocals or they are flip-flopped of one another. So what's going to be nice is we're going to use a lot of what we know about sine and cosine, but just with some twists. So taking a look at these four examples here. So secant corresponds to cosine. Remember, C's go to S's. So what I want to do is graph everything we know about cosine. So my amplitude is 2, my period is 2 pi over 1/2, which is 4 pi, and I have a vertical shift down 2. So let's draw all that in there. So I have my new visual x-axis, and then I'm going to go 2 up and 2 down. And since I'm in cosine, I'm going to be bouncing back and forth on those yellow lines. I've got my first one on the x-axis, my second one at 4, and then my third one in the middle and here. Now here's where things are going to change, okay? When you have cosecant and secant, you're no longer going to have amplitudes. Instead, we are going to have asymptotes. Now, depending on whether or not you have secant or cosecant is where those asymptotes are going to lie, okay? With secant, our asymptotes are going to be in the middle of those x's because those x's are going to tell us where our u's go. And I know that sounds kind of silly now, but as soon as you see the first two, that will make so much more sense. Okay, so between 0 and 2 pi is pi. That's my first vertical asymptote. Between 2 pi and 4 pi is 3 pi. Between 4 pi and 6 pi, 5 pi. Now those x's are going to be where they almost look like parabolas are going to hit. So I'm going to remove myself out from the inside of those yellow lines and I'm going to go out. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. So one way that you can think of it is that when we do these reciprocals, we are moving outside those yellow lines rather than working inside those yellow lines. What those asymptotes represent are undefined variables. So that would be anywhere where we would have a 0 in the denominator. So let's try this again, but this time with cosecant. Cosecant is going to go along with sine, because remember S and C's. So I have an amplitude of 1/2, my period is 2 pi over 1/3, which is 6 pi, and my vertical shift is up 2. So we're going to do that visual x-axis again with my asymptotes, and I'm going to go ahead and place my x's. Remember, this time x's are going to lie on the purple line. Okay, so I've got x and 6 pi and 3 pi, as well as 9 pi. This time, my vertical asymptotes are going to lie on the x's. So when we are secant, which goes with cosine, I go between the x's. When I'm with sine, which is with cosecant, my vertical asymptotes are on top of those x's. The way that I remember it is when my x's are on the yellow lines, those are going to denote maxes or mins of my u's. And then if it's on the purple line, it can't be a max or min because we can't be on the inside of those yellow lines anymore. So let's draw in these vertical asymptotes. Here we go. Now with sine, what's nice is you're going to see pop up very faintly in gray is I'm going to do a dotted curve. See it going in there? That dotted curve, those maxes and mins of the sine curve are going to show me where my maxes and mins of the u's go. Okay, so again, cosecant and secant are going to work very, very similarly. They're just, a little different. Okay, so now let's talk about the specs that I would have asked you for on the last test, which I'm going to ask you for moving forward. Okay, so those specs are amplitude, period, vertical shift, phase shift. Amplitude's going to be none every single time you have a cosecant or secant. Okay, period, vertical shift, and phase shift. The way you find those are all going to be the same. So let's try this again. Secant tells me to do cosine. So with cosine, I'm going to have an amplitude of 1/2, a period of 2 pi over 2, which cancels to pi, and a vertical shift down 1. So let's have my visual x-axis in purple, as well as my amplitude up and down. And since I'm with cosine, that means my x's are going to lie on those yellows. So my first x is going to be on the axis. My second one's at pi. My third one is on pi over 2. Remember that when we shift away from amplitude and towards vertical asymptotes, when you're with secant, which goes with cosine, you have to go in the middle. So between 0 and 2 pi is pi over 4. So my lines are going to be on my 4s this time. And remember, those x's that lie on the yellow lines now are going to show us where our maxes and mins of the u go. So remember, it's not really a reciprocal, but when we go to do it this time, actually it is a reciprocal. We are moving outside of the yellow lines, outside of the yellow lines. All right, last one, cosecant sine. Amplitude is going to be 2. Period is 2 pi over 1/3, which is 6 pi. And I have a vertical shift down 1. Okay? While all of this information is going up in the graph, notice how I haven't done a phase shift yet. That's not an accident. I'm not going to ask you to do phase shifts with these. Okay, so this time my x's for sine are going to lie on the purple line. So that means regrouping. That means my vertical asymptotes are going to be on those x's. So let's go ahead and draw those in. After you draw those in, give yourself a dotted line of what the sine curve would look like so you know where the maxes and mins of those u's were going to be. Here we are, and then draw them in. There you go. Now it's your turn.